Brent?
I'd be blessed like you.
Hey, Steve.
Hey,
Morning.
glad. Yes.
So
Brent
guys,
is,
we're
go
we're
ahead.
live now. We're live now.
Oh, okay, great.
Good morning, units, and welcome to our quarterly training. We're going to do several workshops this morning, but the first one is called All Things Solar and Electric in the State of Ohio. I've been working with my old neighborhood, Edgemont, and for years they've had a solar garden. But working with some of the other members on this panel, we've had the opportunity to talk about solar energy as another enterprise for us to be engaged in. I don't know if you remember in our CRADA training in Springfield, Illinois, probably about 5 years ago, we were introduced to NAACP's Environmental Climate and Justice Committee and the work they have been doing across the state, across the country. And some of our neighboring units in Illinois, in Kentucky, and Indiana had already been doing solar work. And so I thought it was important for us to bring this kind of conversation to Ohio. And I asked Dr. Penn down in Warren to be the chair of the Environmental Climate and Justice Committee. And we've had some good conversations, and this will be an opportunity for us to share with you some of our thinking in Ohio, so then you can decide where your unit wants to jump in and be involved in the environmental climate and justice. So Harry, I will let you kind of moderate what's going on here. I will have each member kind of introduce themselves and just briefly introduce yourselves, and then Steve, I guess Harry and Steve, we can begin with Edgemont and then go from there. Okay?
Sounds good.
So if each member would just kind of take a 10 or 15-second introduction of yourselves.
Good morning. My name is Harry McClure, and I am with GEMS, represents Global Energy Matters here in the state of Ohio. We're based here in Columbus, Ohio, and our interest is that we are a profit entity that is dealing with the communities throughout Ohio in terms of electrical power, in terms of solar, in terms of helping out those communities to retrieve their positions in life. Now, that point is I will ask Steve Ross if you will introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Ross. I'm Executive Director of Great Edgemont Community Coalition, which is a local coalition in Dayton, Ohio, that provides services of urban farming, growing organic in our community, as well as addressing the food desert and other social concerns. And that's about it for me right now.
Thank you, Steve. Frank Harrison.
Good morning. Yes, sir. Good morning. I'm Frank Harrison from Portage County. I bring you greetings from Dr. Geraldine Nelson and the good folks of Portage County. We are in the midst of many new things that we've never thought about going green in our community, especially in our low income and Black communities. So we're excited. We have some good things to tell, and hopefully some good things will come out of this. Thank you.
Good morning. Also, Brent Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. I am Brent Boyd, Chief Technology Officer of Global Energy Matters and one of Mr. McClure's partners. I'm also Chief Operating Officer of Solar Power and Light, who is also a GEM partner, Global Energy Matters partner. But as Mr. McClure mentioned, Global Energy Matters is a global company creating sustainable communities. And Solar Power and Light is a national solar development and construction company working to bring the solar economy to communities all over the world. And particularly our interest is to do that in the Black communities of Ohio and working with NAACP. Thank you.
Okay, I'll turn this back over to you, Tom, in terms of what it is that you would have us to do next, or you just want me to go through?
Well, let's just go through it. But let's first of all, Steve, talk about what Edgemont's been up to and what's now leading it to want to go solar. Then that will lead us into Brent and so on. So go ahead, Steve.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Yes, Edgemont is, like I said earlier, is a local community organization that addresses the food desert and particularly the social issues pertaining to the West Dayton Black African American community. As most Black communities throughout the country, we've had a lot of blight lately because of General Motors in particularly. And when they left a brownfield. We have health issues. We have a lot of things in our community we need to address. So what we're trying to do is turn and change the narrative to a positive. And one of the things being particularly when it comes to solar is taking these blighted pieces of property that were left behind by at least by General Motors and other automobile industries, and turn those into something positive. Right across the street from our greenhouse, we have a 17-acre plus brownfield that's owned by IRG, International Real Estate Group. And it's a blight in our community that's not going anywhere. It's unsightly, and we need to change those things. So with our re-situation with us going into the green, we thought about this solar field. Brent and I started this journey about 5 years ago, trying to work with different people to be able to turn this brownfield into a solar field. We have several. Dayton was a General Motors town, so we have at least 4 or 5 brownfields and at least 2 or 3 in our community, the African American community. So if we can change those those brownfields into solar fields, that takes away a negative and makes a positive. Our community, like most Black communities, suffer from health issues. And to start going green and sustainable is the wave of the future to change the narrative in our community. So I met Brent, and we looked at the brownfield across the street, and we started kicking this can down the road, trying to create something that can actually go not just in Dayton in our community, but something that can be positive throughout the African American communities that have brownfields and fields of where houses were torn down, and you have an area where you can produce energy by using solar power. When it comes to residential use, and I'll let Brent speak more on that, the individual homes where we can save utility costs by going green and solar. So those things, we're trying to reset the narrative for green initiatives, particularly through solar in the African American community, so we can kind of at least join in the game. When you see other parts of town with houses with solar panels on them and businesses with solar energy, there's a reason they got solar energy. You come to our side of town and you see very few solar panels. So we have to do the educational piece in Dayton to get our people to understand that the green initiative is the future. And we need to be on board now with that future coming at us at a rapid rate. We don't want to get left behind again, paying higher utility costs when we need to be taking that money that we can save through solar energy. We can take that savings and create a personal wealth with it. It may sound like pennies, but pennies add up. And so when we understand savings through utilities, that just helps our personal wealth and our community wealth. So it's just not about saving on electricity, but now we got to teach the part of making that some type of wealth. Because if we got $100 savings, we can take $75 of that and spend it, but take $25 of it and save it and start building your personal wealth through green initiatives. And with that being said, I'm going to let Brent take over.
Thank you, Steve. And it's been a pleasure working with you and Edgemont for the past 5 years. And you know, we couldn't have predicted how things have aligned across this country today to bring a lot of the things we've been working hard on over the years to fruition in 2021 and 2022. But I wanted to share the broad narrative of how we can build a vibrant solar economy within NAACP unit communities throughout Ohio, and have that be a model for, national NAACP unit communities across the nation. But with the leadership of President Roberts and the likes of Mr. Frank and other unit presidents around the state, we hope to change that. Typically Black communities are underrepresented in all kind of service industries related to high-tech rollouts. We saw this in the cable industry 30, 40 years ago with fiber optics, and just the entire cable industry in the Black community missed out on, those high-paying jobs. And, we're at the cusp of another major rollout of a high-tech industry, with regard to solar and EV chargers and so forth. I believe Mr. Frank is going to talk about EV chargers, so I'm not going to go into that. I'll stick to solar. But, solar was a $20+ billion industry in the U.S. alone last year, and hundreds of billions of dollars globally. The Solar Energy Industry Association believes that by the end of this decade that the U.S. will get 20% of all of its electric generation from solar power, versus that only being about 2% today. So that's that represents, hundreds of billions of dollars of solar build out across the country in the next, 8 to 9 years. And so we want to make certain that the Black community is a part of that boom, technology boom from all perspectives. I think NAACP and its unit communities have a tremendous opportunity to create equity for our people as it relates to this solar industry. And, Steve talked about the 17-acre solar farm across from his community center there in Edgemont. And, I'm happy to say that after many years of trying to figure out how to bring that project to bear, we've recently, as of a month ago, have received the funding to build a $3 million solar farm on that blighted property in Edgemont as an anchor project to create awareness in the community, and arguably an awareness across the state and the country on how you can transform brownfields in our urban Black communities into assets, while at the same time creating clean air and creating jobs and, creating a tax base. And so what we're proceeding to do next with regard to that property is trying to get a lease option agreement with the owners of that property called IRG, or Industrial Realty Group. And so that would be the next aspect of that project, is to get a lease option agreement, which by the way, the funding that we got to do the Edgemont program was part of a $100 million funding package to build solar on large plots of farmland all throughout the state of Ohio. And we kind of, I would say, we twisted the arm of our investor to say, hey, we've got a small social justice project in Edgemont. We want you to include that in this package. And so that's how this came about. So how do we assure that the Black community gets its equity in this rollout of solar technology? We envision through Global Energy Matters creating skilled trades educational centers throughout the state for training our people in electrical contracting, electric vehicle, and solar installation trades. And so we've got a partner that's a Black organization that's literally a nationally accredited training center to train folks in these areas of solar installation, electrical contracting, EV charger installations. And so we intend to bring that to Edgemont, as well as other NAACP unit communities around the state of Ohio. So that's one way. Solar outreach and awareness programs was a brainchild of President Roberts to go into the many NAACP unit communities around the state and talk about solar and talk about EV chargers to the people, because we don't know about it. We don't know about this industry. We don't know the benefits of solar in our communities. And so we envision that it's important to go into our communities and teach people and talk about the opportunity that lies ahead of us. And so that's another way that we envision getting the word out and creating momentum within the Black community with regard to the solar industry. We also, there are many funding platforms that are being used across the country, and generally not in the Black communities, but funding platforms to bring solar to places of worship, community centers. And so we want to make certain that those funding platforms are being brought to Black places of worship and community centers within Ohio and then across the country. And so we would like to work with NAACP to make certain that happens. So that's another way that we can bring solar energy and lower energy bills to those types of institutions. And then third, bringing solar to residential homes, not only solar, but energy efficiency measures to make homes more affordable. You know, if I can reduce my cost of living in a home, you know, by $100 to $200 a month, that's significant for low income folks. You know, and I hear, you know, we're working with a number of pastors. I hail from Cincinnati, and we're working with a number of pastors in Cincinnati that say, you know, when people come to us for help, it's generally to pay their rent bill or to pay their light bill. And so to the extent that we can bring solar to these homes, that's going to arguably lower or eliminate their lighting bill to give them money to deploy in other areas, as Steve mentioned earlier. And so we envision creating and working with NAACP funding sources to put solar on residential homes within our Black communities and make you know, Black folks have good credit too, you know, and so there are many funding and loan programs. The state of Ohio underwrites a 1% to 2% interest rate loan for energy efficiency and solar upgrades. A lot of people know about these programs, but our Black communities don't know about these programs. And so we want to make certain that there's equity with all of these programs that can bring solar to homeowners in our urban communities. And then, and so those are a few of the things that we envision being able to do with the NAACP unit communities to really take hold of this solar industry opportunity and make certain that we are training our folks on how to get into this industry. You know, there are $100 million solar construction activities going on throughout the state of Ohio right now. And so to the extent that we can get people trained in Dayton and in Columbus and in Toledo, we can tap them into these construction opportunities for these high paying jobs in this new economy industry. You know, that, you know, really will give our folks the skill set to take those skills anywhere in the country with them. Because as the Solar Energy Industry Association says, they envision that we're going from 2% to 20% solar generation in this country by the end of the decade. And so, you know, once you get the skill set and maybe you relocate to another city, you can take this skill set with you and be employable in, you know, jobs that will pay you upwards of $20 to $50 to $60 an hour. And so that's what we're trying to make certain is happening in our Black communities, and particularly starting in Ohio with the NAACP unit community. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Brent. Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
I think it gives us a full picture of where we're going. And I think it ties into Frank, that you want to share Portage County, please.
Yes, I'm very pleased to say this, that being even a small county, we are looking to do some very positive things. My past life, I was a marketing director for PARTA, which is the Portage Area Regional Transportation Authority. We were the first to bring a CNG station to Portage County, and still the only one. And along with that, we also created electric charging stations for folks in Portage County who have electric cars. So we were the first ones to do that, and I was part of that. I'm very proud of that. But also along with that, we have some very exciting things going on in Congressman Tim Ryan's district, and President Robertson and our congressman have conversations about green. For those of you who know that we have the Lordstown plant here in Trumbull County, and we're in Portage, and we're only 25 minutes away from that. And then also there's going to be it's being built right now, an electric plant for batteries. So there's some exciting things for green jobs, and we're excited talking with the congressman, possibilities of making sure that folks, and especially in our minority communities, have an opportunity for those jobs. So those are some of the things that we've been working on with our congressman. Along with our communities here in Portage County, we have just now stepped into looking at what the possibilities of really going green is. We have one community center, the Skills Community Center, which is in Ravenna, Ohio, has a great, nice pond. It needed cleaned up. We worked with the Portage County Soil and Conservation, and we also worked with the Kent Environments and got a grant to help rejuvenate the pond and also to stock it. Our vision there is, if something really happened, how would we feed ourselves and our people in our community? So we're working on stocking those ponds to make sure those things happen. We're also working real hard in different communities, which we have never done before, having community gardens. One is in Kent, Ohio, South End, working, NAACP is working with that community on that gardening. We're also looking at a garden in the McYarworth community, which is in Ravenna, which has never happened before. The real vision is eventually that we would have year-long places that growing vegetables and also flowers and different things that people in the community have been talking about, that because instead of being a food desert, we would be able to have our own food. So we're looking at a place where we can raise some fish, and then we're looking at a place that we can look at growing vegetables. So in Portage County, we've been doing some positive things. To go along with Mr. Boyd, I am so happy to hear what you just said, because that has been one of my visions here in Portage County. I'm going to give it to you, Mr. Boyd. There's another whole group of people that I look at that could really, not only in our community with solar panels, but when you talk about metropolitan housing, in our community, Pam Nation, who's director of metropolitan housing, I've had a conversation with her about solar panels. They just put a bunch of new roofs on a lot of their residents. And she's excited to talk about that, Mr. Boyd. So I hope you get in touch with me and we have a conversation about that. I think that's a lot of us have low housing in communities, and an opportunity for us to do that. And Mr. Boyd, I'm also excited to hear you talk about individual. And you also talked about something else that's been a thought of mine, is our churches and our community centers. Because if something goes astray, we would still have places that would be able to function and take care of our people. And I think that that's a lot that we need to start thinking about in our community. How do we self-sustain and keep ourselves, and to help others? But, we need to start looking at how we do ourselves. And one of the things that, along with the what I would love to see a conversation about it, is that all these electric stations that need to be put in, and who have not yet, but on the other side, they're having this conversation. We need to be part of that conversation, because we have the Ohio Turnpike. It's only 6 miles from where I live, and all the different stations it has, that we should be a part of it. We should make sure that our community has stations. We should make sure that we're part of that. So all these gas stations that will turn into whatever kind of station are, that we have some input. If we don't get at the table now, they ain't never gonna let us at the table. Well, NAACP needs to go in as a force. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So Frank, this is a live broadcast going out all over on YouTube. So we can't tell all of our secrets here, but you have, hit something we've talked about. And when we get back to our Tuesday meetings, we will further talk about it, because we, in fact, want to be part of that distribution for those charging stations. So that is our ultimate goal. So we can talk about that at our Tuesday meetings. Um,
Well, and thank you. That's all I have to say.
okay, thank you, Frank.
And I will call you, Mr. Harrelson.
Okay. Tom, you got it back.
Well, thank you. In all of your eyes, where do you see me going as a conference? Where do you see the conference going, knowing what is going on there in Portage and Montgomery County? And as Brett has talked about all over the state, he has points of interest. And Steve, I think, what you and Frank are talking about, the food deserts, I think those are kind of experiences we can share. But what would you hope to the units to do coming out of this conversation on all things solar and electric in Ohio?
Steve Ross here. I want us to think about how in each pocket, we basically have the same issues and addressing the same problem. So as the old saying go, in strength, then the numbers, there's strength. And I think as we connect, as Frank and I have connected, we're in line. So we just need to be able to share, have a free flow highway of sharing information, sharing things that are going to help us to get more of a focal point and get to where we need to be for our community's health. It's our community health that's at stake here, and we need to be able to change that narrative, and we need to be able to change that narrative together. No one should be leading. We should all be there together, walking hand in hand to defeat these problems in our community. There's one thing Mr. Harrison said that I wanted to kind of get back to, and that was the food insecurity issue. And I wanted Brent to talk about the refrigerator freezer shipping container issue about the food, the storage. So Brent, if you can kind of talk about that solar piece and what it all has and how each one of those in each community can even help with food distribution and giveaways.
Sure, Steve. So Solar Power and Light developed a solar-powered and battery mobile refrigeration unit from the base of a shipping container that is used on ships to move fresh goods across the ocean. So we transformed one of those units into a fully off-grid solar-powered unit, and we're working to. And so we have this at our facility in Dayton, and we soon will be moving that to Edgemont to promote its use in the community. We're working with some West Coast partners that have arrangements with the likes of the Cisco Foods of the world and U.S. Foods to keep that container full of food for free distribution of food into the Black communities, working with community centers and solar gardens like Edgemont's and food pantries as well. And so, I didn't know this until we connected with these West Coast folks, but billions and billions of pounds of food goes into landfill every month because it's not being used and it can't be refrigerated, and so it goes, it spoils, and so they're forced to throw it away. And so these refrigerated containers is a way to divert food from going into landfills, keep it fresh. And people collect and get this food immediately. When the food shows up to the refrigerated units, Steve and his folks are coordinating efforts to make certain that people can same day come and get that food. And so it's a continuous weekly cycle of receiving food and distributing food. So, food might have a shelf life. Certain foods might have a shelf life of, a few days, which explains why it's going into landfills. But with these refrigerated container units, we can divert that food to the units and then into the hands of our people in our Black communities. And so we hope to place these in every major community and multiple units in communities around the state. And we believe that there's a lot of federal and state funding to do this.
Also, I wanted you to talk about one of the things that's really important is the fact that these units come with Wi-Fi with a radius of 3 miles. So it allows our kids to have due to COVID now things are different, but it allows Wi-Fi service within a 3-mile radius of the container, which allows our kids to be able to study and things like that. Can you speak on that just a little bit, Brent, about the bells and
Sure.
whistles?
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that. So these containers are high-tech units. They've got power in them where, let's say the community center wants to come in and plug in their laptop and, kind of manage things right from the container. They can do that. There's Wi-Fi there for the laptops. And then the Wi-Fi units that we're using are pretty high-powered such that they can broadcast a Wi-Fi signal into the community and help with the digital divide that we so much saw during COVID last year. And the digital divide affects the Black community as well as, low income white communities as well. And so the ability to have a Wi-Fi in the community around the community centers, we think is a major asset to the communities as well. And an anchor point by which we can bring more funding into communities for Wi-Fi. I'm meeting with the city of Trotwood on Tuesday, and they're talking about an initiative where they're wanting to get state and federal funding to bring Wi-Fi to the city of Trotwood. And so there's a lot of efforts of trying to alleviate the digital divide from a number of perspectives. And so this container unit is yet another way that we can help with this issue. And that's another technology area that I think NAACP and its unit communities can look for funding as well to bring Wi-Fi to the Black community so that, people can look for jobs, so that people can do research and study for, trade school or college or what have you, right in the Black community, and just be in touch with what's happening, in our communities and in our world. The lack of information, I think, is one of the major reasons why we get left behind, because we just don't know what's happening. We don't know, what the opportunities are, not just from a jobs perspective, but, let's just say micro investment money for a budding entrepreneur to tap into. So, knowledge is power. And so internet has a large part of that.
Right. Tom, you don't have your mic on.
There we go. I just want to say to the units and to unit presidents, I had an opportunity to tour one of these freezer containers, and they're very, very impressive. And I think that's something that, I assume the cost is still like $100,000 or so, but there are opportunities for us to either rent them or lease them rather, and find money. But I think just looking at it in talking to Brent and the owners, it makes a lot of sense. We can use it for food, like Trotwood had just had the tornado. They could have used it as a food place to store frozen food and distribute to people. But the Wi-Fi makes sense. And so it is something that I think we need to continue to talk about, figure out if there's a way for us to sell Kool-Aid or whatever it is, to make $100,000. But I think it makes sense for us to see how many of those we could get in the Black community. Brent, I know that you have several initiatives across the state. And one of my goals in this conversation is to link the 30 plus units to some of the work, to the work that's being done across the state that you and Jim are doing. And the other part is to talk a little bit about going into Appalachian. There's a big move to bring these services, solar energy, to Appalachian. But let's first talk about where you're at in the state of Ohio, so some of the units can say, oh, I didn't know that, and maybe link up with you.
Sure. Our sort of methodology is to link up with organizations in your unit communities that have formalized themselves, because formalizing your community gets the attention of the local leadership, mayors and commissioners. And so we're linking up with bona fide formal communities like Edgemont. Edgemont is a bona fide 501c3. We just yesterday issued a proposal to an organization in Columbus called Impact. Impact gets about $25 million a year to provide services to the community, but they don't and are not offering education programs for solar and EV, electric vehicle charging opportunities. And so we're looking to bring that to Columbus through Impact. But Impact also is very well entrenched in the Black community of Columbus. And so everything we spoke about with regard to solar for places of worship, for solar for and energy efficiency programs for homeowners could be deployed, and the word could get out through organizations like Impact. We're working with Pastor Damon Lynch in Cincinnati to do the same. He actually has a 200,000+ square foot community center in Cincinnati, Mr. McClure, that most of it's going unused.
Yeah, that is correct. And he's using about 20,000 square feet, and he wants to convert into the training center.
So he's pledging roughly 20 to 30,000 square feet for us to bring our accredited training program to Cincinnati. And so there's yet another sort of deployment partner in the heart of urban Cincinnati where we can bring, everything we've talked about this morning. And Mr. Halston, and I'm probably butchering your name, so that's why I called you Mr. Frank, because I can't quite read your last name there because the letters are kind of too small, but we'd love to partner with you and some of your formalized organizations in Portage County to do the same thing in that region of the state that we're doing in Columbus, that we're doing in Cincinnati. So President Roberts, that's the formula. That's the secret sauce there, is to really partner with formal organizations in all of your unit communities to deploy the programs that we're undertaking. We are actually we're tied in with or have knowledge of the Volkswagen mitigation dollars that the state of Ohio got. They got $75 million to build EV chargers throughout the state. And the first $3 million of that fund was deployed in first quarter of this year. But guess what? None of that money is making its way into the Black communities to install those EV chargers in the Black community. So we're getting in front of that, and we have a sort of an effort to identify strategic locations within the Black community where it makes sense to put an EV charger. So Mr. Frank, when you talked about the fact that you're right near the Ohio Turnpike, we want to find a facility or building, a church or community center in your community where we can put an EV charger to support people that are going to be looking for quote unquote electric gas stations. And these things are all part of a network, very much like a Marriott or a Hilton is part of their network, such that, I leverage the Hilton chain. So everywhere I go online and find a Hilton, and Hilton owns, maybe 10 different brands. Sometime I might be staying at a Hilton Garden. Other times I might be staying at a Hampton Inn. Other times I might be staying at an Embassy Suite. But all I need to do is go to the Hilton website, and it shows me where their hotel properties are based on where I'm at. And so EV charging stations are much the same. If I own a Tesla or a Volt, I generally will join a membership network program so that as I'm traveling, I just take out my smartphone and say, okay, where's the closest EV charging station? And so we want to make certain that we start to build these chargers in the Black community and get them on these national networks, so that people know that they can stop in your community up near in Portage to charge their cars. And so we're working to build a list of locations in the Black community across the state where we can then bring money to get EV chargers into those areas. One thing we learned is that one of the reasons why money never made it to the Black communities is nobody is saying, hey, you can put one here. And so before they'll flow the money, they need to know where you intend to put these units. And so we're changing, we're stepping in, Global Energy Matters is stepping in to create the strategic list of, okay, these are the places in the Black community where you should put them, and then we'll go after the money to do that. So, and President Roberts, we are working in Athens County and I think it's Lawrence County in Ironton, which is in the heart of Appalachia, and I believe you want to take us into Portsmouth and some of the other NAACP unit communities.
Right.
So we're running this playbook in Appalachia as well. Appalachia, I didn't realize this, but the Foundation for Appalachia, Ohio says that there's 80,000 Black folks in Appalachia. I almost fell over when I read that. I didn't imagine that Black folks were, there were so many Black folks in Appalachia, but they need us in Appalachia as well. So we're looking forward to rolling our playbook in Appalachia as well.
Great, because I know there's a summit of sort coming up in the next few weeks with the bishop we met with a few weeks ago in NAACP in Appalachia. And we have Chillicothe, Scioto, and Jackson County, 3 units in those areas. So I think I definitely want to pass them into this conversation. Brent, when you said, what kind of sites do we need to be looking for? What do we need to do as units, the infrastructure or whatever, for these charging stations? What do we need to be looking for?
What we heard from the policymakers is that it's best to put an EV charger in a location where, someone might need to charge their car for 30 minutes. And so ideally you want to put them somewhere where people have something to do for 30 minutes. So the solar gardens are perfect because they can go in and buy flowers and buy honey and look at, some of the educational programs that the community centers and solar gardens are providing. And so that allows people to pass time as they're charging their cars. And so, churches, the church in Cincinnati that we mentioned, they're not only a church, they're also a community center. So they've got some things that people can do there while they charge their cars. So that's one aspect, is a place where people can pass time for 30 minutes to an hour. Another key criteria is that, in the beginning, 10, 20 years from now, this won't necessarily be true because you'll need charging stations in as many places as you find gas stations today. But right now in the early stages, you want to put these things near major thoroughways, near major highways or major streets that take you to the I-75s, the I-70s, the I-71s, within a mile or two of those highways, because people are going to, millions of people are going to be traveling these major highways, and they're going to go in their app and they're going to want to get off an exit and go somewhere close where they can charge their car. And so Black, buildings or places that are close to these major highways and the major kind of, county highways and regional highways that get you to the interstates is where we want to place these things in Black communities. And so those are kind of just two kind of criterias that we want to look for and have your units consider, and maybe we can create some kind of, I see you as being the conduit where they send you all of this information and we get that information from you, so that we don't have to necessarily reach out to all the units because you already have the relationships with your units. So maybe we create an online, form where they can kind of submit an application, if you will, in all of your unit cities that say, hey, we've got a place where we want you to consider putting one of these things.
That makes a lot of sense. I think we could do that. Go ahead, Frank. Did you want to say something? No. Okay.
I wanted to interject real quick, kind of piggyback on what Brent was saying. To be near the charge stations, we need to think economically how we can actually use the charge stations to put a small business or have a food truck or have some kind of novelties that when people stop there, our kids or our young adult, I say kids, young adults, they can actually start looking at entrepreneurship, creating businesses around these charge stations. So they have wares and things to sell. So as we build our community, we always need to look, my belief, as the economic factor that's going to help our community. A lot of times we don't tend to see the value in our community because we don't dream a lot and think outside the box. But with these charge stations, you think as service stations or filling stations, they got all kind of those sundry items that they sell. And these same things can be done at these charge stations. So that's another opportunity to create wealth in our community as it may be.
Steve, I want you to think about responding to a question I'm going to ask you shortly. Getting Central State involved and our youth councils involved in what you're doing. And this goes to some what Frank is talking about and others who have gardens. But one of the things I want to just kind of share with everyone is your point. Because I remember years ago when we knew cable television was coming into existence. And then the state representative, C.J. McGlynn, got a guy to train young people in how to climb the poles, how to wire the cable wires from the poles to houses. That's the kind of thing I think we need to be doing around solar. So units be thinking about how we can't become training centers or have someone become training centers for all of this solar, because it's here. I was in Newark maybe 3 years ago visiting a unit, and I had opportunity to watch Habitat put up a solar panel on a house in the poor community of Newark, Ohio, if you can believe that, in Newark, Ohio. But it's happening all around us, and we need to think about it, think economically, how we can't become charging stations, how we can't become those 30-minute waiting stations, but also how we can become training grounds for young people who need to be in this business. Steve, let's talk about a little bit about Central State's involvement with the solar garden there, because that leads me to encourage the units to do what you and Portage is doing, and I'm sure others are doing. That's part of this conversation, is so I can get a feel for who's doing what. You know, I have no clue unless you share with me. But what we're doing with Central State and what we're going to do with the Dayton Youth Council.
So we have, thanks, Tom. So we have a 3-year urban gardening or farming program with Central State. That program came about as urban farming is becoming more recognized. It's recognized through the USDA. Greater Edgemont, we have two things. We have an urban farm number. So we're recognized with the USDA as an urban farm. But as also we have a greenhouse, which allows us to grow year round. And that program, so I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit because I'm kind of excited, but Brent is going to put, their company is putting a solar array next to our greenhouse so we can actually take our greenhouse off grid in order to grow year round, but saving on the utilities. But with that being said, we are growing food, and we went through this program with Central State. We were able to pick 6 potential farmers from our community to go in this 3-year training program to become urban farmers. With that being said, and I don't want to get too far out in front, but we developed a West Dayton Growers Association. So what that does is it unites these urban farmers that we are creating so they can actually take commodities to the market. So I'm using an example as potatoes. So if you got 6 farmers growing, let's say a quarter of an acre worth of potatoes, if they take it to the market, they taking a quarter acre. But if they take those quarter acres and combine them, now you're taking over an acre or two to the market, and that gives you more poundage, more tonnage, and more money on your return. And then those farmers can take and split that money at the higher value that they got for that gross amount. And it allows them to use that as a business. So we got a lot, I don't know about other cities, but in Dayton, we have a lot of land where they tore down schools. So you got 5 or 6 acre lots or tracts, I'm gonna use, that are being unused. So if we take those tracts just in our community and turn those into urban gardening with the West Dayton Growers Association, now these ladies and gentlemen are able to apply and get more gross poundage for each one of those fields. So I'm in a conversation with Dayton Public Schools to work through a mentor program for the students in environmental science, and actually to bring in 4-H to get our high school students geared toward that, but also get Dayton Public Schools to buy in to help create these urban farms and use their vacant school lots to turn into these gardens, because there's potential food places in our community that are just sitting there and getting mowed every summer. And as climate change comes, farming is going to be more and more under roof. And when I say under roof, you need greenhouses to grow. Like Brother Harrison said earlier, you need to be able to supply greenhouses, supply food year round. Farming will not be seasonal. It will be local. They'll be looking for local grown food and vegetables and fish. So you have to be able to see that solar greenhouses with solar power to save on your utilities, that's going to allow you to grow year round, and it's going to allow you to feed your community and educate them through 4-H on health and everything else that's going to pertain to longevity and slow the spread of diabetes and all these other bad diseases that are rampant in our community.
Thanks, Steve. And one way our youth councils and our college chapters could play a role is to be actively involved in whatever community gardens or solar initiatives we take on. We have about 10 minutes in this segment. I want to give you guys the opportunity to just share with us your closing thoughts or your comments that you want the units to know about. So if anyone has any burning thoughts or anything that you'd like people to know about all things solar, and Frank, Brent let the cat out of the bag what I was talking about, the private conversation with Volkswagen. So that's what I'm talking about, getting ahead of it. We knew this, and so we're making those contacts. And so if we can be ahead of the city of Dayton and others who are getting these charging stations, go directly to the source. That is our goal, is to use our leverage as NAACP and go to the source and say, we want to have these charging stations in our units, in our communities, and then working with the unit presidents and the local leaders, we can determine where they ought to be. And I like the idea of the 30-minute. I didn't think about that, Brett. That's a good thing to know. That's why a church would be an ideal spot on a fruit stand. My mother calls it a curb market. She's from the South, going to a curb market, getting vegetables, those kinds of things. So it makes a lot of sense. So I learned something today about the 30-minute, but we have about 5 minutes or so. I'm going to give you guys a last minute to share whatever you think is important for us to know.
Well, Mr. Roberts, first of all, I want to thank you for your leadership in this, because this has taken the NAACPs in Ohio to another level. And my brothers and sisters, if we all band together as a unit, going for the monies that are going to come from the federal government and what we need to do here in our state to get these monies, we can accomplish this under the NAACP umbrella for all of us to work as one. Thank you.
Along that same line, I'd like to pick up, and is that too often, historically, we've all worked in silos, as I indicate. Individually, we can't conquer anything. But moving forward, I think there's three things. By NAACP taking the charge, and Brent laid it out earlier, that time that we create that list that comes through as an application to those connecting factors throughout NAACP, where their needs are, and be able to identify them, then we can collectively collect that information so that the gym can reach in and organize and do what it needs to do in terms of bringing them all together. Because one of the things that our goal is that we have what we call a plow. And that plow is to tear down all the silos that have hindered us from making progress in the past. And that silo indicates that when they're down, there's nothing to be created, come from it, but unity. And that's how we're going to achieve it. We keep looking for individuals, but we have a national organization which is in a position to make a lot of things happen, and we can do that.
I just want to iterate, this is Steve speaking, that I want to thank the NAACP, and particularly Tom himself. We go all the way back to kids. We grew up across the street from each other, so we did a lot of playing and ramming back in the day. But one of the things I want to emphasize and kind of piggyback on is unity. And Tom has always spoken about the unity, and here we are today. Edgemont has the program with Central State University in the urban farming and the 4-H. But Central State is a state university. So to bring that across the state, we can actually do that together. We can get Central State to open up units with this environmental science and green technology and urban farming. All these things we can do together. It can be done. I have no doubt it can be done. And I'm just excited about it because whatever we got at Edgemont, I don't care what it is, we're willing to share across the state because our communities need it. I don't care if you're in Appalachia or if you're in the urban cities, we're all same. We're all the same. And we all got to help each other while we're here because things are getting worse on the outside socially. The country's going through a great change. So with the NAACP as the conduit and all of us coming together, we can bond together and make a change for the betterment of our communities. Thank you.
I forgot to mention one huge opportunity with regard to solar. And, I view needing to bring the entire ecosystem of solar opportunity to Black folk and Black communities. But we are paying landowners, rural landowners, a minimum of $500 an acre. And we're looking for hundreds of acres of land to build large solar farms and sell to the utility companies. I learned through Steve in Central State that there are a lot of Black farmers and a Black Farmers Association in Ohio. To the extent that NAACP can help introduce us to these Black landowners, we'd love to pay them for their land for 30 to 50 years to build power plants from solar and sell to the utility companies. And that wealth will inure to their estate for decades to come. A lot of white folks are getting a lot of money from cell towers and everything else, and now solar is the next cell tower. I want to make certain that our Black farm owners can get in on this opportunity, and we have the money to do that.
Thank you all. Thank you all for sharing your knowledge, your insight, and your wisdom with the units this morning. We had some technical problems, but I think we've had them all ironed out right now. And we want to use what we were doing in Dayton. We have an Environmental Climate and Justice Committee Chairman, Gary Lepla, and Steve is a member of NAACP, and James Price. And they and myself make up our Environmental Climate and Justice Committee. So that was one of my goals, is come out of this conversation with more environmental climate and justice committees in Ohio, begin to think of some of the things that we've talked about today and more. There are a lot of environmental issues, and that's why the National has jumped on board with environmental climate and justice. I'm aware of that because you are aware of it. Where they put the landfills, where they put everything that smells and foul, it's in our communities. And that's why we have to fight environmental racism as it exists in the state of Ohio. I want to thank our panel members for sharing their thoughts with us today. Members, we're going to switch over to a regular Zoom at 11 o'clock. So you all should have gotten a new link to a Zoom meeting, and we'll switch over and conduct the rest of our business on the regular Zoom. So if you can switch over to a Zoom invite, you should have received in the last 10 minutes or so. We'll move over to there. Panel members, thank you. And I'll see most of you on Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Sherry, that kind of ends this portion.